The gate didn't creak. That's the thing nobody tells you about walking out of a place like that. The doors that ruin your life don't make a sound worth remembering. They just click, quiet as a light switch, and suddenly you're standing in the rain with nothing but a folded release form and a grudge the size of a warehouse. I'm Walt Hensley. I'm 71 years old, and for 730 days I answered to a number instead of a name. Because my own son stood in front of a judge and swore under oath that I'd shoved his pregnant wife down a flight of stairs. I never touched her. By the time this story ends, one of us was going to lose everything. I just didn't know yet that it wouldn't be me. They were waiting outside the gate. My son Grant, in a suit that cost more than a used car. His wife Renee, holding a baby wrapped in gray fleece like a prop from a catalog shoot. Behind them, 3 photographers I hadn't invited were already clicking away. "Dad," Grant said, opening his arms like we were filming a commercial. "Welcome home." I didn't move. "Smile," he muttered through his teeth, close enough that only I could hear it. "The board's watching the coverage. You want to be homeless and embarrassing on top of everything else." Renee stepped up next, tilting the baby toward me like she was handing me a receipt. "This is Miles. He's been dying to meet his grandfather. He's 3 months old." He's not dying to meet anybody, I thought. He's hungry and he wants a nap. He's the only honest person here. I looked at her, really looked, past the makeup, and walked around her like she was a mailbox on the sidewalk. The cameras loved it. Grant grabbed my sleeve. I looked down at his hand until he let go, then kept walking toward a rusted sedan where a man in a raincoat was holding an umbrella he wasn't bothering to use on himself. "You're going to regret this," Grant shouted after me, all the polish gone out of his voice now. "The house is mine, the company is mine, you've got nothing." I got in Desmond's car. The seat smelled like coffee and 40 years of friendship. "You look like hell," Desmond said. "I feel incredible," I told him. And for once, that wasn't a lie I was telling myself just to get through the day. Desmond didn't take me home. There was no home to take me to. The deed to the house I'd lived in for 30 years, in the old Brookline neighborhood, had my son's name on it now, and I wasn't in the mood to ask permission to sleep in my own guest room. "There's a place off Route 9, Desmond said. "Lone Star Motel, it's not the Ritz." "I've slept in worse," I said. I just got out of it. The room smelled like carpet cleaner and cigarettes somebody had smoked a decade before the no smoking sign went up. I sat on the edge of a bed that dipped in the middle, and Desmond spread a folder across the bedspread like a man laying out a crime scene. I thought I knew exactly how bad it was going to be. I was wrong by about $4 million. The lake house had sold 6 months into my sentence, for 60 cents on the dollar, to a buyer who turned out to be a shell company Grant controlled. The truck I'd restored with my own hands was gone to an auction house 2 states over. 41% of Hensley Building Supply was, thank God, still legally mine, the one asset his lawyers hadn't found a way to touch. Only because Desmond had fought a preliminary injunction, while I was still an intake number at Marlow Correctional. "There's one more thing," Desmond said, and something in his voice made me look up. "The accountant who signed off on the trust paperwork, a woman named Diane Cho, she quit 2 weeks ago. No forwarding address, but before she left she mailed something to my office. I haven't opened it, figured that one was yours." I turned the envelope over in my hands. I wasn't ready yet. "Tell me something first," I said. "Tell me what actually happened the night Renee fell. I want to hear it from somebody who wasn't in that courtroom performing for a jury." Desmond sighed and sat down in the room's one chair, the vinyl cracking under him. "You'd gone to the house to talk about merger paperwork. You and Grant argued in the kitchen. Renee came down the stairs to referee like she always did. She was 6 months along. She caught her heel on the runner rug at the top of the landing, the one you told them twice to nail down, and she went down 4 steps before she caught the railing. I remembered that argument. I remembered every word of it. What I hadn't remembered, until that night in a stranger's cigarette smoke, was that I'd warned them about that rug back in July, and they'd never fixed it. She didn't lose the baby that night, I said quietly. It wasn't a question I already knew. No, Desmond said. She lost it 11 days later at a follow-up appointment, where the doctor found no injury consistent with a fall. Nothing in her medical file ties the loss to that night at all. But by the time that report came back, Grant had already called the police, and you were already arrested, and the story had already gone out to every camera crew in the county. Once a story like that starts moving, Walt, the truth doesn't get a vote. I sat with that a long time. Outside, a truck downshifted, and somewhere down the hall a television laughed at a joke I couldn't hear. 2 years, I thought. 2 years, for a rug I told them myself to nail down. I finally opened the envelope. Inside were 3 bank statements and a sticky note, handwriting slanted hard to the right, like whoever wrote it was in a hurry to be somewhere else. He made me do it. Ask about the Birchwood Street account. Well, I said, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt something other than rage sit down next to it at the table. Looks like we've got somewhere to start. But what I found at that account was worse than anything I'd imagined walking out of that gate, and it wouldn't have taken shape at all without a waitress. Nobody in that town thought to listen to. The Corner Kettle Diner hadn't changed. Same cracked booths, same bell over the door that never rang quite right. What had changed was the woman behind the counter, Teresa Vance, mid-30s, tired eyes, name tag slightly crooked, pouring coffee like she'd rather be doing anything else in the world. She recognized me before I sat down. That surprised me. "You're Mr. Hensley," she said, setting the cup down without spilling a drop. "You used to tip like the recession never happened." "I used to have money to tip with," I said. She almost smiled. Then she leaned in, voice low. "Your son comes in here sometimes. Him and a guy from the bank. They don't think anybody listens to waitresses." That was the moment I stopped thinking of Teresa Vance as a waitress and started thinking of her as a witness. "What do you hear?" I asked. She glanced toward the kitchen, then back at me. 3 accounts. Company money going somewhere it isn't supposed to. I know numbers well enough to know those don't add up, and I know guilty when a man orders a second drink at 10 in the morning. I didn't say anything for a moment. Desmond, sitting across the booth, had gone very still. "Would you say that in a deposition?" I asked her. "I've got a daughter and a landlord who raises rent every March," she said. "I'll say it wherever it pays my bills and doesn't get me fired from a job I already hate." Good, I thought. Honest and hungry. That's who wins wars, not the people with the most money. The people with nothing left to lose. I asked her carefully why a woman sharp enough to catch a man laundering money over pancakes was pouring coffee for tips instead of running a department somewhere. She didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. "I had a job like that once," she said. "Staff accountant for a used car lot on the west side. Found out the owner was skimming from customer down payments, old folks mostly, trading in a car for something they could still drive with bad knees. I reported it. He fired me before the state finished investigating. And every reference he ever gave after that made sure nobody would hire me for the same kind of work again." She shrugged like it cost her nothing to say, though I could tell it cost her plenty. "Turns out honesty is a great way to end up serving coffee, license and all. I didn't know it yet, but the woman pouring my coffee had already fought this exact war once before and lost. This time, I intended to make sure she won. If I told you I could use somebody who already knows how to read a cooked set of books," I said, "and who isn't afraid to say so under oath, would that interest you more than a lunch shift?" Teresa looked at me the way you look at a man who might be lying, or might be crazy, or might be both. "Depends what it pays," she said, "and whether you're planning on getting me fired from this job too." You won't need this job when I'm done, I said. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. And she topped off my coffee without being asked, which in the world I come from is as close to a handshake as it gets. If you're new here, this is sweet family revenge. The people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. I want to know who's riding with me tonight. Because at this point I thought the worst was already behind me. I was wrong. My son wasn't done yet. Word travels fast in a town where people used to see your name on every job trailer south of the county line. 4 days after my release, Grant got ahead of the story the only way he knew how. He called a reporter himself. I found out the way most people find things out now, a phone buzzing on a motel nightstand at 7 in the morning. The headline read, Hensley family speaks out, son says father's mental state concerning since release. I read the quotes twice to make sure I wasn't imagining them. My father spent 2 years in a very difficult environment, Grant told the reporter. We love him. We just want him to get the help he needs before he does something that hurts himself or someone else. We're exploring whether a guardianship might be in his best interest. Guardianship. My own son, on record laying groundwork to have a judge declare me unfit to run my own company. Unfit, maybe, to run my own life. Desmond called before I'd finished reading it a third time. He's trying to get ahead of the embezzlement claim before we can file it, he said. No hello. Straight to business the way he always did when something scared him. If he gets a guardianship petition moving and paints you as unstable, a judge might freeze your voting shares before we ever present evidence of what he did. This isn't posturing anymore, Walt. This is a real threat. I sat on the edge of that bed with the newspaper in my lap, and for one long moment I let myself feel exactly how close he'd come to actually winning. 2 years he'd had to plan this. 2 years while I had nothing but a cot and my own heartbeat. He's not stupid, I thought. I've been underestimating that his whole life, and it's cost me every time. What do we need, I said, to make sure that petition never gets in front of a judge? Proof, Desmond said. Real proof on paper before he files. Once it's just his word against yours in a courtroom with cameras in it, the story writes itself the way he wants it to. We need Birchwood Street. We need it now, not in 3 weeks. I looked at the sticky note still sitting on the nightstand. Ask about the Birchwood Street account. Then let's go ask, I said. It took Desmond and a forensic accountant. He trusted 4 days of unglamorous work, subpoenaed bank records, wire transfer logs. A condo deed in Naples registered to an LLC with a name so generic it was practically designed to be forgotten, to trace the full shape of it. Grant had been moving money out of Hensley Building Supply for the better part of 18 months. Funneled through a Birchwood Street, holding account, and out to a Florida property he'd told the board was a regional sales office. There was no regional sales office. There was a pool, a boat slip, and according to public tax filings Teresa found scrolling her phone during a slow shift, no sales staff had ever been paid a dime from that address. $320,000, Teresa said, sliding her phone across the diner booth. Just in the last year, and that's only what's on paper. I'd bet my daughter's college fund there's more. He didn't bother hiding it well. I'd waited 2 years behind one set of doors. I could wait a little longer to make sure he heard every one of those numbers read out loud, in front of people who mattered to him. You could go public with this today, Desmond said back at his office, the folder now 3 times its original size. Bury him in an afternoon. Kill the guardianship petition before he ever files it. No, I said. If I bury him quiet, he still gets to be the son who tragically had to protect the company from his unstable old man. I want the whole building watching when it happens. I want him to hear the doors lock the way I heard mine. There's a shareholder meeting in 9 days, Desmond said slowly, understanding where I was headed. Annual review, full board, major investors press credentialed at the door. Then that's our courtroom, I said. The 9 days before that meeting were the busiest I'd been in 2 years. Busier, honestly, than I'd been in the decade before I went in. Back when I still believed being busy was the same thing as being in control. Desmond built the legal case. Teresa, now working evenings out of Desmond's spare office instead of the diner, built the financial one, spreadsheet by spreadsheet, wire transfer by wire transfer. Until $320,000 became closer to $600 once, she found a second shell account Grant's own accountant hadn't flagged. I spent those 9 days doing something harder than either of those jobs. I called board members one by one from a burner phone Desmond bought me, because my own name was still radioactive enough that people hung up on Walt Hensley before he finished a sentence. Harold Combs, the board chairman, was the hardest call. "Walt," he said when he finally picked up on the 4th try, "I have to be honest with you. A lot of us assumed the worst when this all came out. Grant's been very convincing." "I know," I said. "I'm not calling to convince you of anything over the phone, Harold. I'm calling to ask you to reserve judgment for 9 more days and come to that meeting with your eyes open. That's all. If I'm wrong about what I think happened, you'll know it inside the first 10 minutes, and you can throw me out yourself." There was a long silence on the line. "You built that company out of a gravel lot off Route 12, Harold finally said. "I was there the day you signed the first bank loan. I've never once in 30 years known you to bluff about numbers." Another pause. "9 days, Walt. I'll keep an open mind." "That's the most I can promise." I hung up, not knowing if it would be enough. All I knew was that for the first time since the gate opened, somebody who wasn't Desmond or Teresa had actually listened. If you had known what was coming next, you might have made a different call. I almost did. The night before the meeting, Grant made his last move, and it was smarter than I'd given him credit for. He called me, not the burner phone, the actual motel line, because I hadn't given that number to anyone but Desmond. "Dad," he said, and his voice had changed completely from the man at the gate. Soft, almost gentle. "I've been thinking, I know things have been ugly. I know I've said things I regret. What if we talked before tomorrow, just you and me? No lawyers, no board, I could come by. We could figure this out like a family." For about 4 seconds I almost believed him. That's the part that scares me most, even now. Not that he lied, but that some part of me still wanted so badly for it to be true. "What exactly would we be figuring out, Grant?" I asked. "I could restructure the accounts," he said quickly, the gentleness cracking at the edges. "Quietly. Nobody at the meeting would need to know any of it. I'd step back from day to day, give you real control again, and this whole ugly chapter just goes away. Miles gets to grow up with a grandfather who isn't dragging the family name through a courtroom on live television. Isn't that worth something to you?" There it is, I thought, not an apology. An offer. He's not sorry, he's negotiating. "You know what the difference is between us, Grant," I said. "You've spent your whole life thinking every problem has a price you can negotiate down. I spent 2 years learning that some things you just have to pay for in full." I hung up before he could answer. The annual shareholder meeting was Grant's idea of a coronation, chandeliers, an open bar, a slideshow with his face on it more often than the company logo. He stood at the podium telling a ballroom full of investors that Hensley Building Supply had never been stronger, his voice smooth as a man who'd rehearsed the line in a mirror. I walked in through the side door with Desmond and Teresa, a stack of documents thick enough to stop a bullet under my arm. The room went quiet the way rooms do when they smell blood in the water. "Dad," Grant's smile flickered like a bad bulb, "this is a closed event. I own 41% of this company," I said. "That makes it my event too." I watched 2 years of rage arrange itself into something almost calm, the kind of calm you only get once in your life. Right before you finally say the thing you've been rehearsing in the dark. Harold Combs stood near the front, arms crossed, watching. I found his eyes for half a second and gave him one small nod. Eyes open. That's all I asked. I laid it out plainly. No theatrics. The Birchwood Street account. The condo with no sales team. The trust he'd signed my assets into while I was still appealing a conviction he'd manufactured out of a rug he never bothered to nail down. Teresa's statement, notarized, went up on the same screen that had been showing his face all night. The numbers scrolled past, 300,000, then the second account, 600,000 total, then the deed to the Naples condo with Grant's own signature on the closing documents. "This is a smear campaign," Grant shouted, but his voice had already lost the room. "He's unstable. That's why we were exploring guardianship in the first place." "You all read the article. Guardianship," I said. "Filed 4 days after your own reporter called it exploring. 3 days before you knew I'd have proof of $600,000 in missing company funds. That's not concern for my mental health, Grant. That's timing." Renee, standing near the back with Miles asleep against her shoulder, wasn't looking at Grant anymore. She was looking at the exit. "You don't understand," Grant said, and for one moment the polish cracked all the way through. The voice underneath thin and desperate. The same voice I'd hear again weeks later through a prison phone line. "I was protecting the company from you. You were reckless. You were going to run it into the ground the way you always." "I was in prison," I said, "for something Renee's own obstetrician confirmed in writing never happened the way you two claimed. There was no injury from that fall, Grant. You knew that 11 days before you ever called the police, and you called them anyway." The room turned to look at Renee. She was already moving toward the exit, heels clicking on marble the way they'd clicked on wet concrete outside a prison gate 2 months earlier. Grant didn't run. He just stood there in front of 200 investors, soaked in silence instead of rain this time. While security men who'd been calling him, "Sir," for 2 years walked him out of a building with his own name still on the letterhead in the folder under his arm. Harold Combs was the one who called the vote. 41% from me. Another 38 from investors who just watched 600,000 real dollars scroll across a screen was more than enough. Grant Hensley was removed as CEO of Hensley Building Supply before the caterers had finished clearing the appetizer trays. I built these walls, I thought, watching the doors close behind him. I never once imagined I'd need to watch them hold against my own blood. 6 weeks after the gate clicked shut behind me, I sat behind my old desk on the top floor. Mine again. Mahogany again. Signing the paperwork on the Walt Hensley Legal Fund. $5 million set aside for elderly people getting railroaded by their own families the way I was. Teresa sat across from me in a navy suit that fit her like she'd been born wearing it. I'd made her CFO 11 days earlier. The board raised exactly one eyebrow, right up until she was the one who found the third hidden account nobody else had even known to look for. "How's Lily?" I asked. "Loves the new school," Teresa said, smiling in a way that reached all the way up to her eyes. "Asked if you're coming to her soccer game Saturday. She's been telling her whole team her boss brings the good orange slices. Tell her I'm not missing it," I said. "And that I'm bringing the good ones." That Saturday, I stood on the sideline of a scrappy little field behind an elementary school, holding a plastic bag of orange slices and a folding chair I never sat in, because I was too busy shouting at an 8-year-old to get back on defense. Teresa stood next to me in a windbreaker instead of a suit, laughing so hard at my coaching that she nearly missed her daughter's one and only goal of the season. I'd spent 2 years in a cell believing the only family I had left was the one that put me there. I hadn't known yet that the family I actually needed had been pouring my coffee the whole time. Lily ran off the field afterward, cleats muddy, grinning wide enough to lose a tooth over it, and hugged me around the waist without asking permission first. "Did you see it? Did you see my goal?" "I saw the whole thing," I said. "Best goal I've seen all year." "You didn't watch any other games," she pointed out, which was fair and which made her mother laugh again. This is what I lost 2 years for, I thought, watching Lily run back to her team. Not a house, not a company, this. The intercom on my desk buzzed the following Monday, interrupting a meeting that had otherwise been going well. "Mr. Hensley," my assistant said, hesitant, "there's a collect call." It's Grant." 2 years ago, I'd have answered before she finished the sentence. The man who did that didn't survive that motel room. Only the version of me who learned better did. I let it blink twice, put him through. "Speaker." The line crackled with the sound of a place I knew too well, steel doors, distant shouting, a phone with a cord too short to give you any privacy at all. He'd been sentenced to 8 years the week before, embezzlement and falsifying business records. A plea deal that saved him from a longer number, only because Desmond had quietly declined to push for the maximum. "Dad," his voice had lost all its polish. "Dad, you've got to help me. The lawyer here is useless. They're saying I might not even get a parole review for 6 years. 6 years. I know what that feels like," I thought. "I did 2 of them for a crime I never committed." "I need money for an appeal," he said. "At least put something on my commissary account." "The food here is bad." "I know," I said. "I ate it for 2 years and lived." "Blood is thicker than water, Dad. You always said that." He wasn't wrong. I'd said that for 40 years, believing it like scripture. It took a prison cell to teach me the rest of the sentence. "I did say that," I said. "But blood can go bad too, Grant. And when it does, you don't keep the limb because you're attached to it. You cut it off so the rest of you survives." "Dad, don't you dare hang up." I hung up. The silence after wasn't heavy. It was the opposite. The feeling of setting down a pack you've carried so long you forgot your shoulders could feel any other way. "You okay?" Teresa asked from the doorway, waiting to walk into the next meeting with me. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm free." I looked out over the rooftops, the river catching the afternoon light, a city that had watched me lose everything and get it back with interest. They tell you family is everything, that you forgive no matter what, that blood is destiny. They're wrong. Family is not who shares your DNA. It's who stands with you in the rain and who tells you the truth even when it costs them something. I lost a son who saw me as a bank account with a pulse. I gained people who saw me as a man. Saturday, there was another soccer game. I already knew I was bringing the orange slices. That's a trade I'd make every single time. So let me ask you, if you were standing at that gate, watching your own son perform for the cameras, what would you have done? Would you have played along, or would you have walked past him the way I did? Let me know where you're watching this from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this one got to you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts down in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.